All right, Brian, so let's think about it. If we're starting out in our career, we're going to think about this. For someone in their 20s, how should they think about the tax buckets? How should they think about those three buckets and where should their priority lie? And I've already alluded to this. The first thing that I want to remind all of our folks out there in your 20s starting out is that make sure that you respect the food. Brian, can you hold up the thing for me so that we can show?
This thing's got a little tweak to it, so it's not where it was. There it is.
We have a tried and true 9-step process of what you should do with your next dollar. So what we're going to assume is that by the time you're starting to think about tax buckets, by the time that's what you're prioritizing, you've covered your deductibles and you're thinking about your employer match. You don't have high interest debt and you've already built up an emergency fund. So we're going to assume that in Manny's case, case study, he did not neglect the early steps of the food. That's what he did from the time he graduated college all the way till 25. And now at 25, he is starting his journey.
Now look, I think if you're in your 20s and you're watching this content, hallelujah. I mean, you have rocked this thing because I talk about, and I don't have the koozie out right now. I don't know where the koozie is. Somebody must have, it walked out of here. Oh, look, you got one. This dollar has a potential when you're 20 years of age to turn into $88. But every year, there is a step off on that, but it's still pretty exciting. At 25 years of age, his money, Manny the Mutant, has a potential for every dollar to become $44. By the way, if you're curious what your number is, go to moneyguy.com/resources. You can download your own wealth multiplier to know what it is. But here's what the big takeaway on this is. If you can let your money grow at 44 to 88 times over, you want to get that as a tax-free millionaire. Yep. I mean, Lil Wayne, cue the Lil Wayne tax-free millionaires, and the fact that is where I want to kind of really load it up. So we're going to look at the tax-free bucket first.
Yeah, and when we think about tax-free, there's really two accounts that we often think about. It's Roth assets and it's HSAs. And we think that for someone who is in their 20s, for someone who's just starting out, you should do everything in your power to start contributing to a Roth IRA as early as possible. Even if you can't max it out, even if you can't hit the full $7,000, just do something. Maybe that something is $20 a month, $50 a month, $100 a month. You want to start the process of building assets inside of that Roth bucket because Roth assets are incredible.
Yeah, if you what makes Roth so great, we've always talked about that young money millionaire. I mean, because that's really what we're talking about. You get low expenses, you get tax-free growth and distributions. Think about if you're 20-something, when you get to be my age in your 50s and 60s, that money, when it's 7 figures and the government's never going to get their hands on it, you're going to be loving some life. So take advantage of that growth opportunity.
Another thing is that you have the freedom to choose which provider you hold your Roth IRA at. So you want to make sure you have a provider that does have low expenses and fees. You want to make sure that you have one that has a large selection of investments. If you have a Roth IRA and you look at it and there's only a few limited options that you can buy and they're awfully expensive, you may want to consider changing providers because it is so easy right now to go out and find one of the big providers, Fidelity, a Charles Schwab, a Vanguard, that in less than 5 or 10 minutes, you can open an IRA, open a Roth IRA, link your checking account and start putting money into it. And what's beautiful is even if you're unsure about what the future holds, you say, man, I know that I want to start doing a Roth and I want to start putting money into this, but man, it's hard for me to get my head wrapped around waiting until I'm 60 to get these dollars. One little known fact is that you can always get money out of your Roth IRA penalty-free and tax-free for contributions. Now, you never want to use this. This is like break glass only in case of emergency. But if you're having some anxiety around walking away from that dollars, know that there is an escape hatch. But we want you to start putting in, we want you to start contributing because Roth IRA specifically and Roth assets are incredible.
Now, we're talking about tax-free opportunities. Roth, of course, comes to mind, but a lot of people don't realize we love us some health savings accounts as well. And you guys, I talk about triple tax advantage. And what do I mean when I say triple tax advantage? Is that when you make contributions to a health savings account, you get an immediate tax deduction. There's one. Number two, when you invest that money in that health savings account. It grows completely tax deferred. And then that's 2. Number 3, when you actually pull that money out for qualified health care and medical expenses, you get to pull it out even with all that compounding growth completely tax-free. That is triple tax advantage. And by the way, we have bonus territory. We did put the asterisk on there. If you contribute through your employer and they actually take it out of your paycheck, you actually can minimize what you pay in Medicare and Social Security, both for you and your employer. So it's a win-win situation. That makes this a quad benefit. Now, there is a catch. You can only do health savings accounts if your health insurance is a high deductible health plan, meaning you are bearing a lot of the risk on those first few dollars. Your insurance isn't kicking in unless you have something pretty big in your life happen. So pay attention to that, but it is a great opportunity in a tax advantage way to save for the future.
So you can kind of get the idea that in your 20s, the tax-free bucket is where a lot of your attention, maybe even all of your attention, should be focused, but you still do have the other buckets. In the tax-deferred bucket, there's a really good chance that if you work for an employer, in our case study, Manny has an employer that does a 5% match, there's a really good chance that employer money is going into the tax-deferred bucket. So make sure you're getting that free money. Do not leave it on the sidelines. We're always amazed when we see the statistics every year of how many folks are not getting their full employer match. So make sure you get that free money. If Brian and I said, hey, after the show, send us an email and we're going to send you a $100 bill, every single person listening to this show would send us that email. Don't leave that free money on the table. That's probably going to be the main way that your tax deferred bucket is getting built up in this decade.
I always like to make sure if in a modern way, we share that money, the employer money to take the deduction, they have to put it in the tax deferred way. Now, there is legislation that passed where there's now an opportunity. I don't think it's very well adopted so far, so that's why the tax deferred column works. But in the future, you might be able to pay taxes yourself on those contributions, so that way your employer still gets the deduction. But this money potentially could go into Roth. But I just want to give you that just in case somebody here is a stickler for all the details. We know that they've changed that, but I still think most employers are going to put it in that tax deferred column. And I want to give you also just the heads up that in your 20s, probably other than your employer making those contributions, this account's not going to be growing because you're in, from a tax perspective, you're going to be doing the Roth IRA, you're going to be doing the health savings account, and even your employer plan, you're probably going to be making Roth contributions to your 401k because your income is going to be lower in your 20s than it is in your 30s and 40s. So take advantage of that tax-free growth opportunity in those low tax brackets while you're still young.
Now, realistically, when you think about the third bucket, the after-tax bucket, this bucket's probably not going to be growing a ton in your 20s. Now, you are going to have some assets there. Remember, if you're following the financial order, Brian, will you hold the thing for me?
Oh, yeah, it's on.
If you're following...
I got to find it in my folio here. There it is. Hang on, there it is.
If you're following the financial order of operations, you're going to have step 1 deductibles covered. You're going to have step 4 emergency reserves. Those are technically after-tax dollars, but you're probably not going to be investing a ton in this bucket right now because really, we don't start thinking about the after-tax bucket until we get to step 7, until we get to hyper accumulation. So as you are working through your 20s, as you're building your financial empire, don't go out of order of the FOO. The FOO exists for a reason. If you'd like a handy dandy copy, we've already mentioned this, you can go to moneyguy.com/resources and download your copy of the FOO. It's okay if you're not building up all 3 buckets in your 20s. You're not supposed to be. You're supposed to be focusing on the areas that are going to have the largest long-term impact on your financial situation. If you don't believe us, we're going to show you what it looks like for Manny.
Yeah, so, we've laid it out. You put the knives on the right side next to the spoons. You got the salad fork. Now that you set the table, Bo, let's walk through the case study on what happened to Manny in his 20s. To
remind you, Manny starts investing 15% at age 25. And then every year after 25, he increases his savings rate by 1% until he reaches 25% at age 35. He makes $50,000 a year starting at 25, and he gets a 5% pay raise every year. He follows the financial order of operations, and he gets a dollar for dollar employer match of 5%. So by the end of his 20s, from age 25 to 29, What's a scorecard look like? How did it play out? Well, what you can see is that inside of his tax-free bucket, because he's doing his Roth IRA, he's doing his HSA, he's doing his Roth 401k, he has about $61,500 saved up. Inside of his tax-deferred bucket, he has $18,000 saved up. Well, if you look at the savings rate he was able to achieve by the end of this decade, it's 19%. Now, that's amazing. That's incredible. You'll notice it's not 25%. It's not uncommon for folks to not be able to hit the 25% in their 20s, and that's okay. When we look at his wealth score, it's a 0.95. Remember the way we calculate wealth scores, you take your age times your income divided by 10 plus the number of years until you get to 40. So it's a formula we determine to figure out where are you on the curve. And what you can see is that with 0.95, he is almost an average accumulator of wealth. If you have a net worth score of 1, you would be average. Net worth score of 2 to be prodigious. And it's amazing that by the age of 29, he has a portfolio value of almost $80,000. That's incredible. This is an incredibly unremarkable situation, unremarkable circumstance, but by very unremarkable behavior, he has $80,000 built up as it goes into his age 30 decade.
Well, I think about it now. Look, Fidelity has their stats out there, and they say by the time you get close to 30, you should have 1 times your income.
Yep,
and say,
saved up.
Manny's way beyond
He's
that,
beat it, yep.
and he only started this 4 years ago.
Incredible.
That's pretty incredible. If you look at the chart now, that also, he had some major milestones. He got the full employer match. He's maxed out his HSA.
Those are big deals for folks in their 20.
It's a really big deal, and kudos to Manny for just making something happen. And that's the key takeaway for your 20-somethings. Just do something, because a little goes a long way in those early years, because the heavy lift is actually going to occur from the compounding growth factor. And that's why when you look at Manny's journey to abundance, look, now when you hear the terms average accumulator of wealth, prodigious accumulator of wealth, and then our wealth score, a lot of this has the underpinnings of the Millionaire Next Door. Yep. But we've made a key tweak, because even when we talked to Sarah, Dr. Stanley's daughter, when she came out with the next Millionaire Next Door, she confirmed that the Millionaire Next Door wealth score that has a limitation. If you're somebody who just started out, remember, Manny's only been doing this for 4 years. Most millionaires don't hit that status until their late 40s. Yep. This formula had a huge flaw, as it didn't take into account somebody's time. We adjusted that. That's where, when we talk about the formula, it's your age times your income divided by, in the Millionaire Next Door formula, it's 10. But we're like, that's screwing up the bottom number. We need to put on the denominator how many years you have until age 40, and that tweaked the formula in a good way. But here's what I've noticed. It's okay that you're not even reaching average accumulator of wealth. You've only been doing this 4 years. You've gotten the process going, and you're going to quickly see as we go through the 30s, 40s, and 50s. It takes a while for the momentum. You've hit ignition on your rocket, on your millionaire mission. It is starting to take off, but you haven't reached critical mass or escape velocity until you've given enough time for that money to start building upon itself.
In a world where only 56% of Americans could not come up with $1,000 for an emergency. Yep. To see 29-year-old Manny with nearly $80,000 saved up is remarkable.